You are experiencing the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast.
Welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty, where we are bringing you the people and the organizations fighting for liberty around the country and in your region. Also bringing you sort of the issues of the day from a liberty perspective as well. Today, it's just going to be me and Leon here. So Leon, the word Brathwaite, last word in liberty. He is a retired engineer in the state of California. And my name is Jason McPhee, and I'll be your host. So before we get into the topics today, let me just give you a brief rundown. We're going to talk about the narrative because there's all kinds of sort of issues with who's controlling the narrative out there. We see government constantly putting its finger on the scale of what it is we think we know and how we know it. So we're going to talk about a whole bunch of different issues. Trump's, issues with changing or requiring some changes at the Smithsonian. So we'll talk about some of what's going on there. We'll also talk too about this battle Trump has over suing the Pulitzer Prize, the Pulitzer, I guess, nomination company, because they granted Pulitzer Prizes to the New York Times and the Washington Post for reporting breathlessly on a fake Russiagate narrative that they did for several years, and it led to a whole bunch of problems. And so we'll get into a little bit of that. Then we'll also talk too about Trump firing the messengers. You know, when he sort of gets information he's not too crazy about, he seems to, you might not keep your job very long, at least is what it seems like. And then finally, for our Knucklehead Noise Patrol, we'll talk a little bit about some of Trump's recent pressuring of the Fed and whether that makes sense or not. But before we get into any of that, let me introduce you, or let me bring you to our quote of the day. So we always try and bring up a Liberty quote, and in that, we hope that quote sort of ties into what the show is going to be about. And so let's see here. It looks like, here we go. So this time we are going to Mark Twain, or also known as Samuel Clemens, so great American author. And he said, "The very ink with which all history is written is merely fluid prejudice." And, you know, this is one of those things. How do we know what we know, right? I mean, a lot of times we don't even know what's happening right in front of us, you know, whether it's a news story that's happening in our own town or maybe in our own country today. And think about what's happening with respect to history. We don't, how can we even hope to know? And, what are the motives maybe driving some people to change that narrative on us? And so hopefully we'll touch on some of those issues today. But I think this is a real, deep insight of Mark Twain here. What do you think, Leon?
Well, I think Mark Twain is telling us that it does not matter who's writing, whether it's a saint or a criminal, it doesn't really matter. That writing, that product that comes out of that person's mind and onto a piece of paper is going to be biased, regardless. It might be a bias in a good way or bias in a bad way, but it's going to be biased. There's no doubt about that. I think that is what he's trying to say. And if you look at, say, for instance, war, the winners of war usually write the history. I mean, when you look at the history of World War II, we have all these wonderful things about World War II concerning our participation, our being the United States participation in World War II. And you will look at that history, it's glorious. I mean, this was the greatest generation. But I'm sure there are a lot of stuff in there that we will not be proud of that was done and executed during World War II. So the point is that winners write history, and no matter who's writing that history, there's always some bias involved in the writing of that history. So I guess it's fluid, it changes along the way from the truth, I would say, whatever that truth is. So I think that's what he's saying. No matter who's writing it, is always going to be biased.
There's something you brought up there too when you said the winners, and in some ways that kind of is almost a collective term here, that, in a country that's run by a dictator, we wouldn't bat an eye over it. We just assume, well, whatever the dictator thinks, that's what the country thinks and all that. But, here in this country, clearly we don't all think the same thing. So when we say the winners. Well, there might have been a lot of us maybe who didn't want to go to some wars, and yet, so we're still on the winner's side, but we're not necessarily getting all the aspects of the history lesson that we might think are relevant in there. So, yeah,
I think what you're saying there, Jason, is that it becomes absolutely necessary for us to fight to keep that right of free speech, because that is one of the things that are under attack these days is free speech, and there are certain sectors of our society who believe that they should determine the narrative, and only their narrative is correct, and everything else, whether it's talking about Trump bad, whether white people bad, whether this one bad, whatever, all of us must fall in line. Look at people's lives that were destroyed because of BLM, Black Lives Matter. And that organization was nothing but a bunch of crooks enriching themselves. So we have to protect free speech. So even though, yes, the winners will write history, but if we have free speech, at least if we have that free speech, that right intact, we could always fight back against any bias that we see written on the paper. Even though no matter what the fight is, at the end of the day, it's going to be a biased product at the end of the day. It's just that how the bias is going to be represented is the issue.
And what that really drives home is that as you keep bringing up free speech, there's no shortcut around free speech. There's no authority we can ever go to say, this is truth. In the end, right, we always have to be free to talk about it in order to be able to challenge things that, even the great discoveries of science. We talked about Newton the other day.
Yes.
Even some of the things that he discovered, while true, there may be truths, like for instance, in Newtonian mechanics, there's things in relativity that he didn't account for. And yet his Newtonian mechanics still works fine for doing a lot of engineering problems, but it's not complete. And if we were told, hey, this is the great Newton, you can't question anything he says, then then there would have been no room for Einstein to come along and add to it. So yeah, that's something to speech.
And you're absolutely right, because if we take a more pressing example about trying to limit free speech, is to look at religious doctrines. Like, it's almost a sin, both in the cosmic sense and in the physical sense, to question some of the religious doctrines that we see, whether it's in Christianity, where, I was raised in the Christian faith, whether it's in Christianity, whether it's in Islam or Buddhism. It's almost like a crime to question some of the religious doctrines in these different religious institutions. And there are even some countries where there are blaspheme laws to prohibit the discussion. But the prohibition of these discussions is what retards development of nations. That when you have people locked in a box where they don't have the right to think for themselves and to innovate and all these sort of things, all under that umbrella of, well, you have to respect these religious institutions, is what retards development. And unfortunately, we are seeing a lot of that in many countries throughout the world. And that is why here in the United States, as a matter of fact, we are talking about that. We are seeing right now in Europe and in the UK, we are seeing some very real challenges to free speech in these countries. And these countries were some of the creators of Western civilization. And free speech was a big part of that. And so we have to make sure that free speech remain a part of our society for all times. We really do.
Yeah. Well, and when you restrict somebody else's ability to speak, you restrict your own ability to hear. So
sure, absolutely.
So this is something that a lot of people just don't see. Maybe they discount the value of their ability to hear. But, I think this is a good segue to jump into what's happening with the Smithsonian. And let me bring up the article here. So Trump has ordered that there is going to be a review of all of the exhibits at the Smithsonian. And at first blush, this certainly sounds troubling, but the story gets a little deeper. And I think, and maybe the shenanigans don't start with Trump. So let's check out the video on this segment, and hopefully that'll give us a little foundation to talk about.
Now, changes could be coming to your favorite Smithsonian museums. The White House is going to review material in some of those spaces to make sure that they align with what they call the president's view of history.
In a letter addressed to the Secretary of the Smithsonian Institution, the White House laid out a plan that could alter several Smithsonian museums. Content in these 8 museums will be reviewed by the White House to make sure it fits with the president's vision ahead of the country's 250th birthday celebration next year. The letter says, quote, "This initiative aims to ensure alignment with the president's directive to celebrate American exceptionalism, remove divisive or partisan narratives, and restore confidence in our shared cultural institutions." One of the museums on the list is the National Museum of African American History and Culture.
So this should raise a lot of questions. I mean, it should make us maybe think Orwell a little bit. The idea that, government is going in and sort of curating our history, I guess. But when you think about it, I guess, how can that not be the case if government is involved with it? I mean, in the end, government will have a bias one way or the other, which is just a good reason why we should probably want to be skeptical of having government take on a lot of these roles in the first place. In fact, to really dive into that, about 3 years ago, there was a controversy over this history of African American studies. I think it was at the Smithsonian, and they put out an advisory about what whiteness was, and it was just absolutely the most racist and offensive thing you can imagine. And let's check it out.
U.S. taxpayers contribute $1 billion a year to fund the Smithsonian institutions. $33 million of that goes towards the National Museum of African American History and Culture, a stunning building that opened in 2016 devoted to the story of Black history in America. They recently launched a tool they say is aimed at talking about race. In it, you'll find packets of information, videos, handbooks, and a page called Whiteness that has now disappeared from the website in a graphic that was titled this: Aspects and Assumptions of Whiteness and White Culture in the United States, which says this, among other things: the individual is the primary unit, self-reliance. Wife is a homemaker and subordinate to the husband. Christianity is the norm. If you didn't meet your goals, you didn't work hard enough. Hard work is the key to success. And last but not least, under aesthetics, it says steak and potatoes, bland is best.
So there you have it. And we actually have these handouts that they had. So even though they tried to scrub them from history, remove them from the narrative, I just, some of these, I just couldn't believe it. I mean, this thing, emphasis on the scientific method. I think that's the one I find almost the most offensive. The idea to imagine that it's a white trait to be objective and rational linear thinker. I can't imagine how racist you could be to everybody else to say that if you're not white, you may, or I guess that your group, whatever it is, has nothing to do with objective, rational, linear thinking. I mean, how horrible! But that's literally where a government institution got us to in this, and so we bring this up to say that, well, I'm not sure whatever Trump is trying to do here, which things he's trying to put in, but I can guarantee that there were some pretty offensive things there before he came in. This is one of them, right? So they may need a little bit of cleanup. What do you think, Leon?
Well, you know what the goal of these museums are, is to get rid of you white devils. That's what they're trying to do. Don't you know that? It's time you learn that, Jason. I mean, I'm shocked that you're shocked by this document. I mean, come on now. No, but seriously, there's a big quandary here. Okay, number one, the Smithsonian is a government. I don't know. I don't think it's part of any known agency, but it's certainly government funded. I think it's probably independently run, but it's government funded. So that brings up a whole bunch of issues as to to what extent to the government extend itself into the running of these institutions. and something like the Smithsonian, and to what extent could it dictate what these things should display? I mean, clearly, some of the stuff that are being displayed, I mean, you just brought up a very good example. I mean, it's insane. Okay, I mean, this is insanity on steroids. There's no way to get around that. I mean, to suggest that white culture is emphasizing hard work and emphasizing success. So what does that say? The black man is really lazy? Isn't that? Don't they see how racist this is? The implication of that statement is how racist it is. But this is the problem that we have. You see, white liberals have taken over essentially too many of our institutions in government, and we get all of this woke garbage being circulated. So Trump comes along now and he decides, well, enough is enough. So the question is, though, where do you draw the lines? Where would a Donald Trump draw the lines and say what is acceptable and what is not? I mean, it gets back to our issue of free speech, but then you get back to the issue of these are government-funded institutions. How do you draw lines when this is what is involved? So, I mean, I would truly like, honestly, to have better presentations of American history. Fine, they like to talk about slavery a lot. No problem. Talk about your slavery. But for God's sake, talk about the progress that Black Americans have made in this society to the point where we have, well, at least one man who claimed to be a black man. Well, he's half black, half white. But the fact of the matter is, look at the progress that we have made, that blacks have made in this society, Black Americans have made in this society, raising their families and contributing to society in general. Talk about that too. If you want to talk about, yes, the original sin of slavery, fine, you could talk about that. But don't put in all this woke garbage in the process. Like, for instance, the 1619 Project. Nothing but woke garbage. Those sort of things should be definitely excluded. But let's talk about history as factual as can be. I know there's some issues of what would be considered factual, but as factual as we can be. But talk about the progress that have brought us to where we are today, where we are enjoying more wealth, more freedom, more everything good, that is. Well, maybe more of things that are bad too. But we are making far more choices for our own well-being than we're able to, I mean, Black Americans in general, I'm talking about, than our ancestors were able to when this original sin was committed. Just because they bear the brunt of that original sin, it does not mean that we are bearing that too. Our lives have changed radically since that time. But the Smithsonian and these institutions have tried to make it sound like, oh my God, we're still in the 1950s. And some cases, oh my God, we're still going through some form of slavery. God, please help us. This is the nonsense, I think. I hope this is what Donald Trump is trying to get to, is to get some of these things, this woke nonsense, out of the displays in places like the Smithsonian Institute. Even though it's a government-funded agency, so I don't know where you draw the lines. I really don't know how you have what criteria we will develop in the process.
Well, and this is part of the issue, right? I mean, it's that these things are just so unnecessarily divisive. I mean, yes. Why on earth does the government need to even categorize us into groups and bins of people based upon our color and our sex and everything else? I mean, maybe a little bit on sex because there's some real differences there, I guess, that need to be taken into account at times, but certainly on race. I mean, why? It's just so unnecessarily divisive, and to see where this went to. I mean, the idea that here the government is coming up with a document like this and putting it in a museum to educate people. Educate. Right? And I mean, all of these people going to the Smithsonian to be educated. And I mean, the idea that this is white culture competition to be number one, anybody tell that to Michael Jordan? I mean, maybe.
Tell me this. Well, forget Michael Jordan. Fine, Michael Jordan is a good example. But to anybody who's been competing to get into the NBA, the NFL, the Major League Baseball, anybody who's competing, what they must have missed that lesson, in this glorious lesson in their high school or in their college career. This is nonsense. This is woke stuff that we really need to root out of these places. But it's really problematic when it's the government funding these things. Well, actually, it was reported, and I don't know if it's true. I didn't see it independently. That when you walk into one of the Smithsonian institutes, one of their museums, the first thing you'll see is a pride flag. Why? Okay, sure, there are gay people in our society, and sure, I don't want them to be mistreated in any way. But why the first thing we have to? Why is not the American flag? Why we have to see a pride flag as one of the first things that you walk when you walk into the museum? This is the kind of things that I think we should all challenge. Yeah. Because I mean I don't know what would be the possible purpose of such a thing.
Well, and that's the point, right? It's like I think one of the things we sort of hold dear a little bit in this society is that we haven't allowed a particular religion to just take over and dominate on everybody. And think about how that works, right? I mean, there's plenty of opportunities to see statues of Jesus, or all you have to do is go to a church, and nobody has a problem with it. Nobody's tearing down those statues. They're all just there, and people can go and see any of these things that they want. But we don't go to the Smithsonian and suddenly there's a big statue of Jesus right there. You know what I mean? And yet there's a pride flag right there. So I don't understand why we can't have the same model for both. I mean, it's, if you can go celebrate pride on your own and you can go celebrate Jesus on your own, they don't even have to be necessarily exclusive. But yeah, I mean, this is a crazy thing. Why do groups decide they need to force their agenda on everybody else? And anyways, it's nuts. There was one other thing here too that I just thought was absolutely nuts after just seeing it here. Apparently they think it's also white to plan for the future.
Imagine that.
Like people of any other color are just like, nope, future, we don't plan for that. Life just happens.
It's like, Jason, it's like I tell you, man, they're trying to get rid of you white devils, man. That's what they're trying to do. I'm trying to tell you that. You're not getting it, man. You're not getting it.
Aren't they planning for the future if they're planning to get rid of us? They don't even seem to be consistent with their own plot line.
Well, that's good, but that's rich. That's rich.
Well, we're getting close to the end of our normal time. We have just enough time to I don't want to start the next topic before we do. So on this issue of narratives and what we talked about before with Mark Twain, I want to show another video here just to kind of give people a sense of how the narrative, you can't really even trust the narrative from your government, because we saw it change in real time while COVID was happening. And I want to play this video that we've shown before on the show, but of the mask issue. And I think that really demonstrates how, this is why we need free speech, right? Because they would have told us that you can't question the science. If government tells you this is what it is. So, so I'm going to bring up that video right now so we can just get a sense of that.
People should not be walking around with masks.
You're sure of it? Because people are listening really closely to this.
Right now, people should not be walking. There's no reason to be walking around with a mask. Wearing a mask might make people feel a little bit better, and it might even block a droplet, but it's not providing the perfect protection that people think that it is. There are unintended consequences. People keep fiddling with the mask and they keep touching.
One mask is better than zero masks. Two masks is better than one mask. But you don't have to have double masks. Is that right? I mean,
it is.
And now we're hearing we should wear two. Where do you stand on that? If I go to the grocery store, do I wear two? Do I wear three? Is it safer to wear 8?
One of the ways you could do it, if you would like to, is put a cloth mask over, which actually here
And here, where you could get leakage in, is much better contained. So if you have a physical covering with one layer, you put another layer on, it just makes common sense.
we literally saw the messaging change in real time right in front of us. That's one of the great gifts of what happened to us during COVID is it literally ripped the mask off of government.
Yes.
And the idea that they're all knowing and that you can't question them. And I think there were some valuable lessons there that hopefully we never forget. And that's one of the reasons why we keep showing that video during this show, because I can see people wanting to sweep that stuff under the rug and just go along with whatever the government narrative is. That's what it is. So.
And that is exactly the point. Too many things have been swept under the rug. I mean, this thing with Fauci, I think Happy Days should come to America when that man ended up in prison. That man had been totally rogue, had been a total crook. His information was biased and misleading and downright false. He tried to suppress information about the lab leak. All sorts of things this man did during COVID. And he's still walking around with his big fat government pension. And it's not a government pension, it's our money. Taxpayers is funding that pension. And nothing has happened to him. There have been no accountability on this man and his actions. So I think Happy Days will come to America the day we get that man prosecuted for all his actions during COVID. This is unbelievable. But again, it gets back to the issue of the narrative, okay? The government was spreading this narrative to us, continually pushing this narrative. Oh, we need the mask. Oh, we need 6 feet apart. Oh, we need this and oh, we need that. We need to stay home. We can't go out. And all this damn nonsense that destroyed our economy for quite a while.
Well, one of the crazy things too is the left that was, the most tied to the science and not wanting to question the science. A lot of times they're one of their biggest values is this wealth disparity. But, I can't think of a bigger wealth disparity than what happened with COVID, where we allowed all of these big corporations to stay open because by some magic of the science, COVID didn't attack people if you're in Walmart. but it would if you're in a mom and pop grocery store. Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly. So this was part of the science. But I tell you what, though, if you're watching us on public access, we're going to be talking about, Russia Russiagate, Trump's attack on the Pulitzer Prize organization, whatever that is. I guess we'll get into that, and some of the firings and his pressuring of the Fed. So, but if you want to watch that, you're going to have to go online to knuckleheadsofliberty.com to catch the rest of it. But anyways, back to the show, Leon. So let's see. Did you have any more thoughts on that before we jump on to the next topic?
No, we could go on. When the only other thought is that I want to see somebody make sure that Fauci end up in prison.
Yeah,
that's the only thought I have on that.
See a little bit of justice. I mean, remember he got a pardon so that we couldn't even question it anymore. Although, there is a possibility that they could at least bring him up in front of Congress, and he would have to plead the fifth. I guess he can't plead the fifth.
He can't.
Pardon.
Not if his pardon is in effect. Now Trump is questioning some of those pardons, so I don't know what's going to happen on that front. But he can't, if that pardon is in effect, he can't go plead the fifth. He has no legal jeopardy.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll get to a little bit more truth there as well. But let's get on to this story of defamation, where we had the issue of Russiagate and how the media and our Justice Department was weaponized to look into Trump's connections to Russia while he was a candidate running for the presidency. So, which is extremely serious. When you talk about election interference, it's hard to imagine bigger election interference than the government held by the opposite political party targeting its opposition during an election. So that's what this is all about. And so he's going after all these groups in court, just trying to sue them. But one of the things that did drop recently is that they're saying now Obama is tied to this as well, is what they're saying, and they are talking potentially treason, which is ironically what they were talking about for Trump when they were ginning this stuff up. So I don't know, but let's jump into a video so we can understand a little bit more about what's going on here.
There's no question in my mind that this intelligence community assessment that President Obama ordered be published, which contained a manufactured intelligence document. It's worse than even politicization of intelligence. It was manufactured intelligence that sought to achieve President Obama and his team's objective, which was undermining President Trump's presidency and subverting the will of the American people. So accountability is essential for the future of our country, for the American people to have any sense of trust in the integrity of our democratic republic. Accountability, action, prosecution, indictments for those who are responsible for trying to steal our democracy is essential for us to make sure that this never happens to our country again.
The witch hunt that you should be talking about is they caught President Obama absolutely cold. They tried to rig the election, and they got caught. And there should be very severe consequences.
So this all goes back to the investigations that were started before Obama left office to delve into the idea that Trump might be a Russian puppet. And this was pursued through a special investigator that essentially got launched by those that initial push from Obama. So the government was literally looking into our current president, then at that point Trump, for ties to Russia. And it turned out that it was pretty much all fake, and that the big media sources, mostly on the left, like the New York Times and the Washington Post, had all sort of given themselves Pulitzer Prizes for their investigative work in this, and it all turned out to just be fake news, which is, part of, I guess that's one of the hallmarks, I guess, that Trump has brought us to understand about the reporting and the bias that has been in the media. But to understand it a little bit better, let's look at a little bit of the findings of the Durham report.
Yesterday, Special Counsel Durham handed down his 300-page report into the FBI's investigation into Donald Trump's alleged ties to Russia. This investigation was known as Crossfire Hurricane, which operated from 2017 after the 2016 presidential election until 2019. Former Director Robert Mueller ran the investigation that was looking into whether the conspiracy theory was true that Donald Trump colluded with Russia in order to influence the result of the 2016 election. In March 2019, Mueller's $32 million FBI investigation ruled there was simply no evidence to support the theory. But we have to remember that back in 2016, Hillary Clinton's team continuously pushed the narrative that Trump was colluding with Russia as part of her own campaign tactic. After it was revealed there was no evidence behind any sort of partnership between Trump and the Kremlin, former Attorney General Bill Barr directed John Durham to launch an investigation. This investigation would basically look into what evidence the FBI had on Russiagate that would warrant the Bureau to orchestrate a $32 million probe. It has taken 4 years for Durham to reach the conclusion that the FBI's investigation of the former president was seriously flawed and failed to uphold their mission of strict fidelity to the law.
So essentially, the Durham report found that the FBI was extremely reckless and negligent in their investigation of Trump, and it appeared to be for political reasons. But let's hear some of the specifics of that.
Part of the report read that the FBI discounted or willfully ignored material information that did not support the narrative of a collusive relationship between Trump and Russia. Similarly, the FBI Inspection Division report says that the investigators repeatedly ignored or explained away evidence contrary to the theory the Trump campaign had conspired with Russia. It appeared that there was a pattern of assuming nefarious intent. An objective and honest assessment of these strands of information should have caused the FBI to question not only the predication for the investigation, but also to reflect on whether the FBI was being manipulated for political or other purposes. Unfortunately, it did not. In particular, there was significant reliance on investigative leads provided or funded directly or indirectly by Trump's political opponents.
Let's hear what former Attorney General Bob Barr had to say about it, who was the Attorney General who launched the Durham investigation.
Hillary Clinton's campaign, who launched a smear campaign that was based on getting Russian sources to spread false information about Donald Trump and peddle it to the press and to the government, the FBI. And both the press and the FBI abandoned any semblance of professionalism and took up the cause with a vengeance.
And so there you have it. That's kind of how we got to where we are. But how this is sort of materializing at the moment, aside from the charges that Tulsi has leveled against Obama, and remember, she is the national.
She's the director of national intelligence.
Yeah, and so this carries a lot of weight by her saying this, but So that is one path this is taking potentially through the Justice Department. But the other path is Trump is suing the the Pulitzer Prize because they legitimized all this nonsense by handing them these awards. And
yes.
I don't know. I mean, to me, it's I kind of think if they give them an award, I don't think that's grounds personally to be sued. You can give an award to whoever you want to give it to, but it should lessen everybody's view of the value of the Pulitzer Prize, because if it's just going to be a tool that's handed around to to help legitimize things that aren't credible, right? It's sort of like it's a tool of misinformation at some point, I guess you might say.
Yes, yes.
No.
Even though I agree with you that I mean, I'm not sure that Trump really have grounds to sue here. I mean, yes, a lot of the information was false. A lot of it was misinformation, and granting of the Pulitzer Prize. I mean, it was really a travesty when you think about it. But I'm not sure you have grounds to sue anybody because of that. Okay, they reported a lot of stuff, obviously, about Trump, and a lot of it was false. Fine, we accept that. But that doesn't, to me, rise to the level that he think he should sue anyone. But underlying all of this thing here, this lawsuit, this ongoing lawsuit, is some very serious things that are going on here in our society that have to be investigated, and some people definitely need to go to prison over this. And I mean that sincerely. I know I like to use that kind of loosely a lot on this show, but I am telling you, this thing was an attempt to destroy the presidency of Donald Trump. And let me give you a date. December 9th, 2016. That was the day President Obama, he was president at the time, gave the order to destroy Donald Trump's presidency. And I mean that just as I say it. There's no wiggle room in here, okay? Brennan, Clapper, Joe Biden, Susan Rice, Samantha Powers, and all of them were in that meeting in the White House on December 9th, 2016. Obama gave the order. Now, some people say, well, Obama is going to have immunity because these could be classified as official acts taken while you were president, and it was just an order to investigate. And he could make that claim, and thus he should be immune. Well, there is a way to break that immunity. It's called impeachment. We all know about that. But it's unlikely that they will impeach an ex-president. It's very unlikely. But that's the only way they could break the immunity, to break the immunity in those cases. But where Obama is seriously vulnerable in this thing, and initially he said treason, I don't think it's treason, Jason, because treason is defined in the Constitution, and it's only it could only be used during wartime or when there's the making of a war. But I don't think it would be treason. It would be something like a very serious charge of some sort of seditious conspiracy, and that's serious business. People just go to jail, serious jail for that. Okay, but where Obama may be vulnerable is that he ordered it. He ordered this thing while he was president, which is true. Okay, but his presidency ended on January 20th, 2017 at noon on 2017. Most of the activities that came out of that order occurred after he ended his presidency. So does the immunity still stand? I don't think so, because the activities that came from his order went well after, at least 2 or 3 years after his presidency ended. Also, there's another aspect where he might be in legal jeopardy. If Obama had one phone call, if there's one text message, if there's anything that shows that he communicated with any of these people after his presidency ended, he's cooked. He's part of it. He's completely cooked. If any of these people communicated with all of the people that we know, what Brennan, Clapper, Susan Rice, all of them, if any of them communicated about this matter about him after noon on January 20th, 2017, if any one of them communicated with Obama communicated with any of them about this matter, cooked. There's no immunity. There's no court that's going to grant him immunity in those cases. But this thing, though, is very, very serious. And if we let this thing stand, we are lost as a republic. Because one of the documents that they used going after Trump was the Steele dossier, which was riddled. I mean, I read the dossier, and before I was done with the first page, I could see all the errors, factual errors in it. And you can't tell me the FBI could not have known this too. Okay? There are all sorts of factual errors in that dossier. But that dossier was used as one of the things that they're going to use to go after Donald Trump. God help us if we let this thing stand. It cannot stand, and it should not. And I hope to God, I mean, we have always had all these promises about accountability. It's time for some accountability. It is time. All of them need to end up in prison, and I mean that. Otherwise, this whole thing continue. When Richard Nixon tried to do his garbage, well, Richard Nixon really got in trouble because of the cover-up, not because of the activity itself. But when they did, John Mitchell ended up in prison, G. Gordon Liddy ended up in prison, and some other people end up in prison. We need to have this again to show these people in this deep state as we know them to be, that they cannot continue to do this, undermine the presidency, and try to undermine the will of the American people. We elected Donald Trump. In 2016, I didn't vote for him, but we elected him, okay? We elected him, and that is our choice to make, not theirs. So I hope to God some of these people face justice and accountability.
You know, one of the sad things is it does feel like we're getting to a more accelerated, perilous place, I guess. So many things, between the debt, between the stakes of what's happened at every election, that, when Trump first started running, he was kind of joking about locking Hillary up. Now it's a real blood sport. I mean, the Democrats came for him, and he appears to be coming for the Democrats at this point. And, the sad thing is, from a liberty perspective, the solution is pretty simple. And it's the reason I think everything's getting jamped up is because government is so far into our lives that when we have an election, think about how much changed with this last election when Trump got reelected and the path we were on with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, where we had people streaming over the border, where you had essentially this move to really push maybe transing of the kids and all this other kind of just nutty stuff to really push change in our society. Men beating up women in the sports arenas, and just one kind of the DEI stuff. I mean, the absolute, that whole white culture thing that we talked about earlier, of trying to divide us in these ways. And yet, I'm sure in past, you go back far enough in history, and I'm sure that, conservatives had areas where they were pushing on people, maybe with censorship and things like that, maybe book bannings and other things like that. But the point is that the more government gets into our lives, the bigger the consequences of every election, to the point where people who are totally indoctrinated in whichever side they're in, they'll lose their minds if they're going to lose and have to live under the other side's rules. And I think that's a dangerous place. And that's really a sign that we need to shrink the size and scope of government so that we can all get along with each other and not be seeing each other as the enemy on everything.
And Jason, this is really some important points you're making here. And you're right. Government is too much in our lives. Government is too large and too much in our lives. And overall, what is happening is government trying to pick winners and losers. And anytime the government is trying to do that, it's going to be a disaster. And we know they're always going to pick their political friends. And it's always going to be, what could I do for you? And what can you do for me? And this is where we start crossing the lines into criminality. And all this thing that we see here, and you're right, because you see now Trump going to go after the Democrats. I legitimately think he should. When Richard Nixon in 72 to 74, it was discovered what he was doing. The Democrats went after him, and then even the Republicans joined in it. I think it was legitimate to do that. But the fact of the matter is, government is too large, and they're too much involved in our lives, because the government will always then try to pick winners and losers. And anytime they start to do that, we are looking at disaster. You're looking at where they're going to weaponize agencies. During Nixon, they did the same thing. They used the IRS to go after people. And to some extent, the FBI. I don't think the FBI was too deeply involved with that one, but it did happen. Here we have the accusation here is the FBI, the intelligence community, all of them were weaponized to go after Donald Trump. They even reached a point where they raided the man's home. They raided the man. This is an ex-president, okay? They raided the man's homes under the pretext they were looking for these classified documents. Well, just around that same time, Joe Biden was being investigated for having classified documents. Some of them went back as far as his Senate days when he was in the Senate, in the U.S. Senate. Some of the documents that he had, classified documents he had. There's no raid. Nobody raided his home. So you see, this is a problem. Government gets so large that they decide to think that they are an entity unto themselves, that they're not answerable to us, the people. They are not. This is what the deep state have become, that they are so entrenched within the government and so involved in our lives. They have become like a fourth branch of government within the government. And this is the danger that we face with big government, that these people have become an entity unto themselves, and their only purpose and only existence, they believe, is to protect themselves. Because when Trump came in the first time, he hired a man named, he was General Flynn, I can't remember his first name, but it's General Flynn. General Flynn used to head I believe, the NSA or one of those intelligence agencies. But the first thing they did, this deep state, the very first thing they did was to destroy the life of General Flynn. That was the first thing they did. Why? Because Flynn would have known what they were doing. So they had to get rid of him. And they did. For that, they put that man through hell. He had to sell his home and do all kind of stuff and things like that. Eventually, Trump had to pardon him. There's a whole long story. We could do a whole show on that one. But the point is, government is too large. And within that government is a government who believe they're an entity unto themselves. They are the fourth branch of government, and they could make choices over who the president should or should not be. Dangerous place to be.
Well, the comical side of this whole thing too is back to those Pulitzers, and we've gotten to the point where these things are being used, I think, at this point for propaganda, so much so that now we hear these things like the Nobel Prizes. In fact, when Obama first came into office, he was given a Nobel Peace Prize before he'd done anything.
Yes.
So I have a video of that.
9 days into his presidency, and they gave him the Nobel Peace Prize.
How politicized all this stuff is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
unbelievable. And the thing that we really don't.
So aside from handing out Pulitzers for fake news, we've seen a lot of these sort of awards be degraded, I guess, by handing them out freezing up reasons. And I guess the best example I can think of.
I'm still here.
Having trouble getting the video to load. Leon, can you hear me testing? I think we're going to have some material that we have to edit out of this.
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you. And yes, you have to edit,
I think things are freezing up just a little bit here.
Okay. Is that around the 49 minutes? We'll have to remember to tell James.
Okay. Let me see if I can get this video to play then, because things are.
Okay.
So this one has to do with
Okay.
Okay. Whoops.
All right.
We got to how to get this other window off of the. Let's see. Here we go.
Yeah, there we go. Okay. Yes, I remember we had to tell James to cut out some of that stuff. Okay.
Yeah. No, I think maybe that AI is after us again from the last show, trying to come after us. But anyway,
that was our original sin. That was our original sin. Okay.
Well, we were talking about dubious use of these prizes to sort of propagandized and set a narrative. And that's one of the things we saw when Obama got elected was the use of the Nobel Prize by the Nobel Peace Prize to kind of stack the deck. And so I wanted to show a little video of that too. Because like I said, here were Pulitzers that we just were talking about that were essentially handed out for fake news and they don't want to give them back. so anyways, here we go with the Nobel Peace Prize here. So aside from handing out Pulitzers for fake news, we've seen a lot of these sort of awards be degraded, I guess, by handing them out for political reasons. And I guess the best example I can think of was Obama receiving a Nobel Peace Prize before he actually came into office. So, I mean, he was nominated before he came in and actually did anything.
I'm Julie Pace at the White House. We all woke up this morning to some news that can really only be described as stunning. President Barack Obama has been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Now, the Nobel Committee says they awarded this to Obama for his extraordinary efforts to strengthen international diplomacy and cooperation between peoples. Obama becomes the third sitting U.S. president to win the Nobel Peace Prize. But what's particularly shocking to a lot of Nobel observers is he only took office 2 weeks before the deadline to nominate someone for the Nobel Peace Prize. And of course, a lot of his critics are going to be saying, what has Obama done in the past 9 months to actually win this award? If you look at what the Nobel Committee said, a lot of this is really about setting a tone for this award. They take sort of a veiled jab at former President Bush, talking a lot about not Obama's actual accomplishments, but what he says he wants to do down the line.
This kind of reminds me of the false valor that you see in some of these crazy little dictatorships where generals are given all of this fruit salad of medals to put on their uniforms to make it appear that they've done something, to give them some sort of false credibility. It also makes me think too, gosh, if I think about running a race, maybe they can give me a medal just for my intent to run the race.
The runners take off and you walk behind and then you just say, yes, I deserve a medal too. So, but on a serious note though, one of the things that we don't discuss, that I don't think we discuss enough, is the media's participation in all of this. And they are very, very good. The media, the mainstream media has clearly chosen a side here, okay? And it's left-wing side. We know that. Everybody knows that. It's such a horrible thing that we see that's going on right now. Jake Tapper wrote this book called Original Sin. It was written after Biden left office. And his co-author is a guy named Alex Thompson. Alex Thompson was in a White House correspondent dinner. And Alex Thompson had the balls to get up and say the following. Many of us, including me, missed the story about President Biden's cognitive decline. Really? You missed the story? Or you deliberately ignored it because it was convenient? This is the sort of things. They never learn their lesson and they participate in this cover-up, this misinformation dissemination. They do it all the time. During COVID, they were right there with the government. During the Russia hoax, they were right there with the government. During Biden's cognitive decline, they were right there with the government, continually. And this is where we end up, with a media pushing disinformation and trying to call it journalism. This is dangerous stuff we're talking about here. And these people are supposed to be protected by the First Amendment. I would like to say you'll take away the First Amendment for these people, but you can't. You shouldn't. They should be able to spill their nonsense, and the rest of us hopefully will be able to decipher what is true and what is not. But we have to be careful about these things, about the roles that these people are playing and continue to play in our lives. because it get back to what we're saying. The government are becoming too large, is too large, and it's too much in our lives. Okay, and now they're getting to us through the mainstream media, which is kind of sick when I think about it.
Yeah. Well, the sad thing is that there are legit criticisms of Trump out there to be discussed and to had, but the problem is they have so destroyed their own credibility by trying to smear him with so many things that weren't real, that now it makes it look like it's nothing more than a partisan hit to try and go after him from the left on anything. And certainly, we could have probably a fruitful discussion about the tariff, policy, and we could probably also have a fruitful discussion about his involvement with cryptos. While he is promoting cryptos through the government. So these are different things that all raise some potential issues, but they're out there chasing a witch hunt on almost everything else with him. And it just, it's kind of sad. In the end, the truth, the truth is the one that they can beat.
We always hope that the truth will bubble to the top at all times. But what you're raising here is a real thing. There are legitimate criticisms of Donald Trump. There's no doubt about it. I just mentioned I didn't vote for him the first time because there are legitimate criticisms of the man. There really is. There's nobody could argue that point. I mean, you just raised tariffs. I have a lot of things to tell Trump about that one. Okay, this tariff is, even though I voted for him in 2024. But the fact of the matter is, those are legitimate criticism in the sphere of our political discourse. But what we've seen with some of these people is just what they call as TDS, Trump derangement syndrome. I mean, no matter what Donald Trump does, is some sort of problem with these people. If he have a peace accord in Rwanda, is a problem. He have a peace accord somewhere in the Middle East, is a problem. Is Donald Trump bad? No matter what he does, we get the same answer from them. Oh, you know what? Just recently, Trump ordered the takeover of the police in Washington, D.C. All of God, the media was up in arms. They were quoting, these statistics, crime is going down. Crime. The people in Washington, D.C. are suffering because of the crime, the crime wave in Washington, D.C. And what do we get? We get the media telling us, no, crime is going down. Don't worry about it, crime is going down. Now we find out, and they put out statistics showing crime is going down. Now we find out that there are people within Washington, D.C., the government, the city council, or whatever it is, who are putting together false statistics to make it look better than it really is. Yeah. And this is the thing, the media will not investigate these things. It's just that Trump is bad. He sent the military in there. He's a dictator. He's trying to take us over, blah, 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 blah. And that's all we get from them.
And to be fair, I mean, there would be a legitimate criticism to not so much the Washington, D.C. issue. He has the legal power to do that. But the issue when he says, and maybe we're going to do this in New York and Chicago and a bunch of other places. Okay, now you have something legit to actually push back against, right? But, unfortunately, it turns out every time the left shines a light on him for anything, you wind up finding all this corruption that the left has.
Exactly.
I mean, like you're talking about the DC police, it appears that they have been reclassifying their crimes, recategorizing them so that they don't pop up in the FBI crime report is what it appears to be. And it's almost like something right out of The Wire. If you're watching something, if you haven't seen the show, the the Showtime series, rather, The Wire, check it out. It deals with the city of Baltimore, but they go into all of these different aspects of city government that are corrupt as heck. Yeah. And, including, their war on drugs, but they get into the media, City Hall, the police department, all these different aspects. And it's a really interesting watch. But one of the things I really connected with in the first season was watching them try to rig the crime stats. I watched as the police captain was trying to figure out how he could get the murder of this one person, this homicide, off his books. And so it was just finding some technicality so he could move it from one bin into another. And suddenly it makes his stuff look better. And it had nothing to do with getting to justice or solving the crime. It was just about how do the numbers look in the end. So
yeah, I've heard a lot about The Wire. My kids have watched it quite a lot. I just have never got around to it. I always planned to, but I never did, but I've heard a lot about it though.
Well, certainly worth watching. And that was actually something I was thinking about for this show too, the narrative, who sets the narrative. There was just so much to talk about. I didn't get to that topic this time, but maybe we'll hit that topic a little more in depth on another show. But I did want to get to something that is a little more troubling with Trump. We've been beating up the left so much so far on the show already. But it is this issue where, if you are essentially have a message that he doesn't agree with now, you're, I guess, shoot the messenger is is a term that might apply here. So anyways, there's a little video I have of a couple of firings that he's done, or job terminations that he's been involved with recently. And they do raise some troubling issues. So let me pull that video up for you.
Just hearing from President Trump via Truth Social that he is firing the Commissioner of Labor Statistics. He says effective immediately. This, of course, coming after the jobs report this morning showed lower than expected job growth for the previous month, as well as major downward revisions for the past two. So the president focusing on those revisions in particular in this Truth Social post, saying he's firing Dr. Erica McIntyre for the Commissioner of Labor Statistics because she was a Biden appointee. She was appointed to her job in January 2024. He says this is the same Bureau of Labor Statistics that overstated the jobs growth in March 2024 by approximately 818,000, and then again right before the 2024 presidential election. He says these were records. No one can be that wrong. We need accurate jobs numbers. Goes on to say, I have directed my team to fire this Biden political appointee immediately.
So this case is kind of interesting because you don't want to have any organization that's just simply full of yes men. You want competent people. That said, is it politics that Trump is firing her, or is possibly their politics involved in her interpretations of the data? I mean, this is part of the problems that you run into when the incentives are all messed up with government. I think another thing that's lost in this as well is that they put out these numbers that are not complete early, and then people react to those numbers, and then they correct the numbers over time as more of the survey information comes in, which sort of begs the question, why are we putting out incorrect numbers? I mean, this is a incorrect map better than no map at all? This is, I mean, certainly you expect these numbers not to be completely off target, but this is what we're dealing with here. Another story that's a little bit disturbing is the firing, or I guess pressuring out, it depends upon where you're hearing the story reported, of Dr. Vinay Prasad at the FDA, who was a very prominent scientist who was skeptical of the vaccines during COVID. So he's, kind of one of the good guys here, I guess. But he was also pressured out, and I think that story is kind of interesting. So let's hear a little bit more about that.
Dr. Vinay Prasad, a top Food and Drug Administration official, stepped down from his position after being accused by right-wing activist Laura Loomer of being a progressive left-wing figure seeking to sabotage the Trump administration. Despite garnering conservative support over matters such as his skepticism of COVID-19 vaccines and criticisms of pandemic-era mask mandates, Prasad recently drew outrage from factions of the Republican Party, including Loomer, who disagreed with his approach to approving gene therapies for rare diseases and accused him of holding liberal views. Loomer also criticized Prasad's approach to drug approvals for rare diseases after he pushed back against approving several drugs, which he said was sabotaging Trump's deregulatory agenda. Amid the controversy, the Department of Health and Human Services confirmed this week that Prasad stepped down as the FDA's top vaccine and gene therapy regulator and chief medical and scientific officer. The announcement seemingly scored another victory for Loomer, who was viewed as playing an integral role in multiple other resignations or firings of top officials in the Trump administration.
Although this story is a little bit disturbing, the undue influence of this social media person on the Trump administration, it does sort of have a happy ending in that I guess the people at the FDA and the CDC Kennedy and, oh gosh, I can't think, the guy who was in charge of the FDA, they both stood up for Vinay Prasad, and he came back. So we kept a good person there at the position. So there you have it. You know, a lot of questionable terminations. I don't know. I mean, this is part of the problem, though, with government, right? Is that you know, we have people in these positions, and a lot of times they're highly political, and yeah. So I don't know. What do you think, Leon?
Well, I mean, I think, well, for one thing, I think the president should reserve the right to fire anybody he wishes. You know, everybody, for the most part. I mean, there are some people with civil service protection and all that. I don't understand that, quite frankly. But everybody serves at the pleasure of the president. I mean, certainly the high-level positions, they serve at the pleasure of the president. And the president has the right to terminate them as he sees fit. The problem is that when they have these sort of firings, you start to raise questions about legitimacy of the firing itself. Not that Donald Trump does not have, or any president for that matter, does not have the authority to do so. But the legitimacy of it sometimes look quite fishy, especially the involvement of this woman, this Laura Loomer, whatever the hell her name is. I mean, I probably will agree with a lot of the things that she says and stuff like that. But some of her influence in within the administration sometimes seems a little bit too deep for my liking. Because in the past we have had other suspicious firings done by presidents. Bill Clinton fired every single U.S. attorney when he took office. It's the first time that ever happened in U.S. history. We had, who was the other one I was trying to think about? I can't remember right now, but firing of people under suspicious circumstances by presidents is nothing new. The issue becomes is when the firing is occurring under circumstances where the legitimacy of the act could be questioned. And certainly the one with this doctor from the FDA, I mean, that was certainly something that should be questioned, even though Trump was legally authorized to do so, but within his executive powers. But it raises issues. It raises issues, but he does have the authority to do it.
Yeah. Well, one of the things too, and I heard this. I was listening to a podcast that. We've actually had the guy on our show, John Papala from Dad Saves America. And he had kind of an interesting take on this when he said, you know, you think about something like the BLS, and when our country was really growing, when we were really a free market dynamo, I guess, we didn't have any of these government organizations trying to count the beans and tell us what we should be, you know, doing or not policy wise. And maybe this is part of the problem, right? Is that you know, we've got all of these different government agencies trying to measure things so that then they can have a policy to address them. So you know, it's like to say, you know, like what's the unemployment rate? Well, and I think, you know, the business sector can figure that out for itself. I mean, so who really needs that information then? It's the government, because the government wants to do a policy, right? To say, oh, well, now we need to change the Fed interest rates or something else, right? Because, you know, the unemployment rate is this high, or we need a new government program or a new government, you know, slush fund or something to address this problem. And, you know, it does bring up the question. I mean, how much of this do we even need government doing? So, and this doesn't say whether Trump was right or wrong and not wanting to hear the answer here, but of what the BLS commissioner was saying. But the bottom line is that maybe, you know, we could solve this problem by just getting rid of a lot of this stuff.
Well, you know, but this is the point. I mean, it goes back to what we were saying before. The government has just become too large. They're trying to do too many things, and many of those things we start to get involvement in our lives and then get involvement in our liberties. And whenever that begins to happen, we have problems like these. The bottom line is, after all of this, is the thing you said. the government is too large and too much involved in our lives. And if we can find some way to roll that back, then let's do it. Because I mean, you're starting to feel like we're on the Titanic, and you're looking at that iceberg out there in the ocean, and we're about to hit it. God help us that we could steer away from that iceberg. I hope.
It feels like some of the people steering the ship think it's a good thing if we hit the iceberg. I don't know. We can't see. We've had plenty of time to turn, and we're not turning. We're still heading toward that iceberg.
True. Very true.
You have to wonder, is that the plan?
Very true. Very true.
I don't know. But, speaking of these government agencies and Trump putting pressure on some of them to get the results he wants, this is a good segue to our Knucklehead Noise Patrol, where something that happened a couple weeks ago between Fed Chairman Jerome Powell and Donald Trump, and it is comic gold. I mean, if it was a television show, you probably couldn't have got a better laugh out of it. It just seems like something out of The Office. Anyways, let me show you this video clip of Trump pressuring Jerome Powell in front of the cameras.
So we're taking a look, and it looks like it's about 3.1 billion. It went up a little bit, or a lot. So the 2.7 is now 3.1.
I'm not aware of that.
Yeah, it just came out.
Yeah, I haven't heard that from anybody at the Fed.
Yeah, it just came out. Yes.
You're including the Martin renovation. You just added our entire capital. Yeah, you just added in a third building. Is what that is. That's a third building.
Well, no, but it's a building that's being built.
No, it was built 5 years ago. We finished Martin 5 years ago.
It's part of the overall work.
But it's not new.
So we're going to take a look. We're going to see what's happening, and it's got a long way. Do you expect any more additional cost overruns?
Don't expect them. We're ready for them, but we have a little bit of a reserve that we may use. But no, we don't. We expect to be finished in 2027. We're well along.
This is just like a Michael Scott moment out of The Office, of course, starring Trump. And this is just nuts. Here he is sort of ambushing Jerome Powell with, I guess, fuzzy math on the overrun on building costs on the Federal Reserve buildings. But why this is so tense right now between these guys is because Trump is trying to get the Fed to lower interest rates to try and goose the economy. And if you're at all skeptical of the government, you really don't want the government to have a role in this at all. But we do have a Fed, and of course, this is where we are.
President, as a real estate developer, what would you do with a project manager who would be over budget?
Generally speaking, what would I do? I'd fire him.
Do you think he was the president because he could to do that?
Well, I'm here just really with the chairman. He's showing us around, showing us the work. And so I don't want to get that. I don't want to be personal.
And the comedy continues. It's just nuts. They sort of teed him up with that question there of cost overruns. What would you do? I'd fire him. Well, he's standing right next to Jerome Powell. So, this is the type of stuff. I guess you'll probably never see this sort of comedy in our government again after Trump. So enjoy it while it's here. But let's see this last bit here where it really gets to the point of the interest rates, which is what I was talking about before.
Are there things the chairman can say to you today that would make you back off some of the earlier criticism?
Well, I'd love him to lower interest rates. Other than that, what can I tell you?
I mean, you couldn't write that. I mean, or maybe you could, but you'd be a pretty good show if you actually had a scene like that in something like The Office or something else. Just absolute comedy gold.
I mean, the whole concept of the Fed and determining interest rates is so flawed. We could probably spend a whole show talking about that. Why interest rates cannot be determined in the marketplace? Why the Feds have to be making these decisions about what interest rates are not? I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. But Trump is not helping his case here by telling him, "Oh, I want to fire you so I can put in somebody who will lower interest rates." That is not what we want. We want the marketplace to determine the interest rates, regardless of what it is, whether it's high or low. If it's high, we don't like that. But if that's one of the outcomes, that's one of the outcomes. But Trump now wants to just have somebody in there who is do his bidding, which is I want lower interest rates. So somebody in the Fed will lower the interest rate. We don't want that. We want the marketplace to make those determinations. And this is a thing about Trump that Trump doesn't understand. It's the same thing about these friggin' tariffs. Okay? Oh, yeah, we collected all this money from the tariffs and blah, blah, blah. Who the hell you think is paying that? Who the hell you think is paying that? It's we the people, the taxpayers. Some of us voted for him, and we paying this crap. So this is the kind of lunacy that has come out of Donald Trump that's really bother me. You know?
Yeah.
God.
Well, and when he says it too, and I meant to use that as one of our knucklehead noise patrols at some point coming up, but he's literally him and his people, not just himself, but the people who are working under him, are cheering it. Like, you know how much we raised under tariffs?
Yes.
It's like saying it like somehow we found money under the mattress. No,
no. There's a monetary growing in the back of the White House, and that's where he found it. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, those companies aren't sending us money to do business. If you believe that, then you believe the claims of the left when they say that you can just simply tax a corporation and it will have no impact on prices, right? I mean, this is the same logic, right? Is to say that, oh, don't worry, they've got a pile of money somewhere, and if you charge them more taxes, they won't charge you more for the goods. They'll just simply. Well, that's the same idea. These companies are bringing stuff in from overseas, and the idea that somehow they have extra money just sitting around. No, you're paying it. Now, maybe you can argue that there's some reason, maybe for a tariff, that maybe somehow a country is using slave labor, and you want to discourage people from supporting that or something else. I don't know, but I mean, the idea that we're going to make money by charging tariffs is lunacy.
Well, they do quote unquote make money, but they make it from us, not from these government, not from the countries that are sending the money, sending goods into the United States. So they do actually make money, but it's where that money is coming from is what these people don't seem to understand, and this is ridiculous.
Yeah, because in the end, this comes back to that collective we thing we were talking about. We're not making money. The government is making money, and it's making it from us. I think it's like,
exactly.
Me cheering because I'm paying a tax. Woohoo! Look at that government coffers go up. You're going to reach into my wallet and hand some more money to.
This is ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
We should make up a little chart to show these idiots, just a little, maybe a 2-page, 3-page PowerPoint to just show these idiots that is we paying these tariffs. Now, honestly, I have to confess that even though this is a bunch of idiocy and I'm totally against tariffs, I'm willing to give Trump a little bit of runway on this for one purpose. If in the end of all of this nonsense, that it will in general lower tariffs around the world on goods and services coming into the United States and give us more access into markets, into foreign markets, I'm willing to give him a little bit of runway if this is the end goal. Okay? But really and truly, these tariffs are really ridiculous. But if at the end we could have this kind of outcome, I'll be willing to give him a little run on it, even though that's a bunch of damn economic nonsense. We know that.
And that seems to be the only semi-sane interpretation. But then it's sort of blown out when you hear them cheering about how much they raised over tariffs. You'd like to think, well, they must know what they're doing. This must be some fortune. Nope, it's not. They're literally cheering for the wrong things. Oh, yeah. Well, anyways, that is pretty much our show for today. So, Leon, do you have any final thoughts you wanted to share before we pull our disappearing act here?
Well, I think happy days will come to America when we see accountability for some of these people who have been doing all this damn nonsense in our society, undermining us as a people and undermining the presidency of a person we elected. So when happy days will come, when these people are held accountable.
Yeah, that would be a happy change anyway. Well, anyways, if you've been watching us, thanks so much for watching. And until the next show, think about what you can do in your community to try and move the ball for liberty. We've had lots of different guests talking about things they've been doing. In fact, we're going to have a guest coming up in a few weeks. Michelle LeMay is coming back to talk about Constitution Day here in Sacramento, and they're going to have a celebration out there, and we might pop into that as well to check out some of the tables. So definitely tune in for that. But like I said, these are types of examples of people trying to do things in their community to move the ball for liberty. So think about what you can do before the next one, because that's the only way we're going to be able to preserve this precious freedom. Till the next time, though, stay tuned and stay free.
Oh, yes, indeed. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, always and forever.
Thank you for listening to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. Find us on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, your favorite podcast network, and at knuckleheadsofliberty.com.